Hey, Garbrac here with another Elder Scrolls Online video. In this video, we're going to be talking about the combat of Elder Scrolls Online and how it's going to work. Fighting in an MMO is one of those things that can be really fun or mind-numbingly boring. MMO's combat system in the past have been all about the action bar and the whack-a-mole healing. It's only recently that we've been seeing MMO developers make that push from staring at the group windows or the combat or the action bars and putting our attention into the middle of the game, into the gameplay itself. Guild Wars 2 encouraged players to stare at the combat and make sure they're aware of their surroundings with the active dodge and the little to no cooldowns. But even in that game at times, I caught myself staring at the hotbar to see if a cooldown was off. During my 2-hour gameplay at PAX East, I can say Elder Scrolls is leaps and bounds ahead of any other game I have played that gets players to stare at the screen in the combat aspect of it and not at the action bar or watching numbers. There are no cooldowns in Elder Scrolls Online, so you're not waiting for that perfect rotation to make sure you're hitting that button that second the cooldown comes off. The only cooldowns that are in Elder Scrolls Online is the provisions, so your potions, any food stuff that you make, that'll all have a 20-second cooldown on it. I'm not a major fan of the Elder Scrolls single-player games, partly because I'm not a single-player person. I don't really enjoy single-player games. But one of the things that really bugged me was the clunkiness of the combat, especially in Skyrim. The game seemed sluggish and slow. Swinging my weapon, it seemed like my character was having a very hard time to swing that. But it was just the type of combat. It was slow for me. And again, that might just be because I come from the MMO environment where everything is a little bit more fast-paced. In Elder Scrolls Online, I did not have this feeling. The combat was very fast-paced and incredibly fluid. Even the NPCs were smart. Maybe a little too smart, because I died a lot. But during my 2-hour gameplay, I played as Garbrac Pax. You have to have two names, so I named him Garbrac Pax. I played as a Breton Dragon Knight. I was dropped into the game right after being rescued. I'm not going to talk about exactly how I got rescued or what happened that required me to be rescued. I'm going to leave that to you guys. You guys can either go Google it if you want, or just wait till the game comes out, or if you happen to get into beta, definitely check that out if they have it in there. But I'm not going to spoil anything for you. So, as soon as I got into the game, I jumped out, walked out of the house, grabbed my first quest, and I started to kill mud crabs and bandits. Just like in every other Elder Scrolls game, you use your mouse buttons to attack. Your left click is your standard attack, your right click is your block. And if you hold down left click, you do a heavier attack. Now, at the lower levels, it's about 1 to 2 heavy attacks before you run out of stamina. But again, that will change as soon as you level up and get better gear that has more stamina, or you put your points into stamina. So, I'm referring to only 1 or 2 attacks at level 1 to 3, basically. One of the comments I made to the developers was, I was fighting, but I saw this heavy attack coming after me, and I went to go block. But my character didn't block because he was in mid-swing. So I pulled the developer aside and I said, what happens if I'm in mid-swing? Am I able to block? And Maria was the developer we were talking to. And she said, at the moment, they're still working on the visual effects of it. So if I'm mid-swing and I right-click, I'm actually blocking. You visually won't see it. But according to the game priority, blocking takes priority over anything you're doing. So if you're mid-swing, mid-cast, you block, you right-click, you're going to be blocking. Like I said, visually you won't be, but according to the game code and priority list, you are blocking. You are able to block with any weapon. So if you dual-wield, staff, sword and board, single-handed, you're able to block. The way the blocking works is, obviously if you have a shield, you're going to be able to block a lot more damage. Not really block, but mitigate a lot more damage. Some damage is still going to continue through. If you're blocking a magical effect, some of the damage is still going to get pushed through. So sword and board is obviously the best option for blocking, but even if you're dual wield or staff, you are able to block, which is essentially parrying. I mentioned earlier that the Elder Scrolls Online mobs are smart. So let me give you a little bit of an example of how smart they are. I hit level 2, and I was in this ruined structure. And at level 2, I got 1 skill point, and I picked that Grapple. I'm sure you've seen it in the introduction video. I picked the Grapple. So I run into this structure, and I see this mob sitting over on the stairs, just standing there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll pull him. And when I pull him, I notice he's an archer, but as soon as he got close to me, he put his bow away and pulled out a sword. Starts whacking me with the sword. So I target him, I start taking him down with my sword. And then, out of nowhere, his friend shows up. His friend must have been up behind a box. I didn't quite notice that. So his friend shows up and actually stands in between me and the archer. And I'm like, okay. Well, because he stood in front of me, and I'm not using the soft targeting, he took priority. So I started to attack him. I got lots of life. So I started attacking him. And then I notice, I'm only fighting one guy. Where's the other guy? I look over, and the other guy, the archer, ran away, pulled out his bow, and started plucking me into a pincushion. After that, after I pulled all the arrows out of my body, I continued on with my quest down the road. I was playing with the grapple, so I was pulling enemies just that were on the side of the road, pulling them closer and playing with it. One of my pet peeves about other games that have like a death grip or a chain pull or a charge is the incorrect pathing. Sometimes you'll have we'll use charge for example. So if you charge at a mob and it moves, you'll end up where they were to begin with and not where they are now. Same with death grip. If I'm running and I death grip somebody, they're going to end up behind me because I'm running forward. And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. Incorrect pathing. Now, because it's a pet peeve of mine, I tested it. So with my grapple, I would grapple and strafe, and it would land right beside me. It wouldn't land somewhere else. I also tried jumping off of a cliff, down onto, like, having the mob below me, jumping off, trying to grapple him up. There's games like SOTOR that have really bad pathing, where if you jump down and you pull him, he's going to get slingshotted up into the sky, and you're going to stand there going, you going to come down so I can kill you? This game, I tried to grapple him, but it only moved across the ground to where I would be. So when I landed, he was right there. And Maria's standing behind me going, you can't pull them up there. They need to have a path. And I was like, that's great. I like that. But there's certain games that have that where you can pull them up. And to me, that just seems like a broken mechanic. So one thing I want to mention before I jump into the synergy section of this is a lot of people have been reading and commenting about how Elder Scrolls Online does have scrolling combat text. And it does. It is a feature implemented into the game as of the current release that they had at PAX. For the aspect that they're going for is to try and keep your attention on the gameplay and not on numbers or on the action bar, they're actually taking that out. They're taking out the scrolling combat text at launch, or before launch. And I agree, because there's times where I was playing and I was looking at the numbers, like I was trying to see how high I can get. And as much as I am an MMO player, it takes me away from their vision of the game. They want you to be playing the game and looking at the game as you play it, not staring at numbers. And the scrolling combat text, I did stare at the numbers. So I'm glad they're taking it out. It's not a really big loss for me. But if you do want the scrolling combat text, the game will support full LUA mods. So somebody, if you're smart enough, just create a mod and there you go, scrolling combat text. So, on to the synergy system. Back in December, I wrote about the Elder Scrolls Online combat, and I talked about the synergy system. So I'm not going to repeat everything I wrote. Just take a look at that article. I put a link in the description as well as a link in the article. What I want to talk about is some of the things that I did learn at PAX and at the Tamil Garden. So let's take the Sorcerer, for example. The synergy system is all about working off of each other. So you play a Sorcerer, and let's say you get an ability where you can drop down a lightning field. So when you activate this ability, your targeting system changes completely. You'll get if you've ever played World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, you get the ground reticule, where you can move it around anywhere on the ground and then place it. You get that similar mechanic. Once it's placed, anybody can walk up to it and they'll get something on their screen that says press X to activate Y ability. And when he does that, or when they do that, they turn into this giant lightning conduit and start spitting out lightning balls. Like I said, synergy is all about combos and working off of each other, and the finesse system is all about the correct follow-up. The easiest way to explain it, the finesse system, is to give you an example. During my playtest, I got distracted by how beautiful the game is and how pretty the water is. It's DirectX 11. It's really good water. And I didn't notice that the creature I was fighting had a slight sparkle around it. Now, I use sparkle in a general term. It doesn't like turn Twilight and go vampirish and twinkle twinkle. It just has light rays essentially coming off of it. So, I didn't notice this the first time, and Maria's standing behind me going, block, block! And I was like, huh? And then, whack! There's half my health. One single hit took half my health. If you have ADHD and pretty things distract you, you're gonna miss those key opportunities. So the sparkle indicates that a heavy attack is incoming. Because I didn't block, it took half my health. But had I have blocked, noticing the sparkle, and I block, the mobs will then be vulnerable. You'll be able to follow up with specific attacks. So I would block, I'd follow up with a heavy attack, the creature or the mob would fall flat in their face, and I would just start wailing on them to oblivion. That's the finesse system at work. Being able to properly follow up and combo off of each attack, essentially. At level 15, you're given the option to... You're given the ability to switch weapons. So you get a weapon swap while in combat, which is probably my personal favorite option. There's nothing worse than being a tank and trying to take down a keep and all you can do is poke it with your sword. I mean, there's rams and trebuchets and other siege weapons that you can use that'll do a whole lot more damage than you just going, I'm gonna poke you. I can't tell you how many times on my warrior in Dark Age Camelot we were taking a keep and I'm just standing there going, eh. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's all you can do. I mean, it just really sucks. So, I just really wish there was an option in Dark Age where I could switch to either bow or take out a magical ability and just start plucking off the people from the top. Enter Elder Scrolls Online. Matt Firor was a developer for Dark Age, and I think he had the same idea as me, whereas he either played a melee character and had absolutely nothing to do while taking a keep. With Elder Scrolls Online, you have that weapon swap. And because any class can be anything, you don't have to focus specifically on one area. And if you do, you get enough points, you focus on a second area, so your warrior can then switch and pull out a bow or a staff and start casting lightning bolts or shooting arrows at either the guards on top of the wall or the defending NPC or the defending player. At the beginning of this video, I talked about whack-a-mole healing. I typically play healers or tanks in my MMOs. And in the previous MMOs, healers never really felt part of the combat. We always stood back, watched the raid frames. We didn't really have to worry too much about conal effects or anything like that because we were so far out of the combat. We didn't really feel like we were part of the combat other than the fact we were healing the people getting whacked on. Elder Scrolls Online is trying to do something a little bit different, and the healing is completely different from what we're used to. So, in Elder Scrolls, you can only heal with AoE heals. And when I first heard this, I was like, what? Healing's going to be really lame. So at PAX, I brought up the question, hey, why did you guys decide to go with this option? And the answer they gave me is probably the best answer I could think they could ever give me. They said when they first designed the game, they had targetable healing, so you were able to target your players. But in certain instances, it just wasn't a feasible option. You couldn't do it. So let's take World of Warcraft, for example, where you have a free camera movement. If you're in a fight, standing in the middle of the fight as a healer, and there's 5 group members, so we'll say there's 5 rogues or 4 rogues and a tank, and you want to heal the tank. If everybody's standing on the tank, how would you heal them? How would you target them? Excluding the raid frames or the group windows or grid. You can't really target them. So what would you do? You would rotate your camera so you're looking straight down like a bird's eye view, and you would click on them. Now that works great for World of Warcraft because you have that option of free camera movement. But in Elder Scrolls Online, you don't. So how would you target them? You can't. You can't specifically target that one player. And that was the one thing they were really noticing when they were testing out the targetable heals. Was there were certain instances where it just wasn't working. And the group player would die, or you would just have so much problems. So they said, they sat down in the meeting, and said, you know what, this isn't working, what other options do we have? Well, AoE healing. Makes sense. I mean, it's really the most viable. And because you can be a hybrid healer, you can stand up in the fray, send out the support heals that your group needs, as well as pop some damaging abilities on your hotbar, and still add the DPS that you need. I really like the aspect of the AoE heals now that I know why. It definitely makes sense. All in all, if I had to sum up the ESO combat into one word, it would be fluid. I would definitely have to say it would be fluid. In between how the characters react with each other's spells and other players' abilities, and how the NPC mobs interact with each other and how they fight us to try and take us down, is very fluid and very immersive. There was times where my heart was pounding and real edge of the seat suspense, if you will. So I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts on the combat system? What is the specific feature that you're looking forward to most? Let me know in the comments below. And like always, if you find this video somewhat informative, please like and subscribe.